Okay, you're recording, so just so you know.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. It's 6 o'clock. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for your attendance at the annual county attorney training. This is something that I'm required to do annually, and something that you all are required to attend annually. We asked this year that any new board or commission members attend this interactive presentation. And other board or commission members who are returning will be required to watch this or another training before the end of February, just to make sure that everyone has a refresher. Um, so many have tried and many have failed to make this presentation funny or interesting. What I have done this year to make it different is I've streamlined and organized the materials. I've tried to work in some of the new considerations or issues that have arisen during COVID. And then for purposes of this PowerPoint, I've hyperlinked it. So this PowerPoint will be up on my website starting tomorrow. That's the summitcounty.org and then the attorney page. And so any questions that anyone has about Open Meetings Act compliance, you can refer to this counterpoint and then hyperlink to any specific provision as we go along. So I hope that this is a reference material for you guys as the year progresses. So jumping right in, and anyone interrupt with questions. We really do want this to be interactive, especially for new board and commission members. So I'm starting with the statement of public policy, and this is really the page that you can return to if you have any questions at all. We exist to aid in the conduct of the people's business. We conduct our deliberations openly and we take our actions openly. That right there is the fallback. By we, I'm meaning public bodies, which is any administrative, advisory, executive, or legislative body consisting of two or more people that expends, distributes, or is supported by tax revenue and is vested with authority to make decisions regarding the public's business. If you received an invitation to attend this presentation this evening, you are a member of a public body. So I have divided the Utah Open and Public Meetings Act into several categories. These are the categories that we'll be going over this evening. The Open and Public Meetings Act pertains to notice requirements, location, the conduct of meetings, both open meetings and closed meetings, emergencies, record keeping, and enforcement. So the first topic we'll talk about is notice. Notice must, at a minimum, be provided 24 hours in advance. Notice must, at a minimum, be posted in 2 prescribed places, and we'll get to what those mandatory prescribed places are in a moment, and it must include your agenda. The 2 places that notice is required to be One is this Utah Public Notice website. It's operated through utah.gov, and it's a good tool because it's a central repository for information. I was going to have an interactive here, but you could literally go click on county, go to Summit County, look at all the boards and commissions that exist in our community, and then go and get agendas and notices for any of our commissions. Citizens can also sign up to get automatic updates. So if you're trying to follow, say, North Summit Rec District, you can get an automatic notice when, or an automatic email when there's a new agenda posted or a meeting noticed up. So that's the first place that boards and commissions must post at least 24 hours notice of a public meeting or public hearing. Also required for notice is a newspaper of general circulation. So that's that small print section in the back of most newspapers. These are 2 newspapers of general circulation in our community, but you're going to need to also post your notice in advance in a newspaper. For all boards or commissions that hold regular meetings, you will also once a year need to post a schedule of those meetings. And I just took a picture here of what the Summit County Council did. Was it December or January? Looks like it was January. I don't have my glasses on. Anyway, we posted a general meeting schedule in the same manner that we did for our other public meetings in the newspaper and in the public notice website of what our schedule of regular meetings was going to be. And each of you are also subject to that requirement if you have an annual meeting schedule. So those things might seem a little laborious and not really designed to reach the public. The statute encourages public bodies to, quote, develop and use additional electronic means to provide notice. What we're really trying to do is keep our communities and members of the public informed about what's going on. And so posting on a website, while not required, is a really good method. Posting on your door, if you've got one, is a really good method. And then some boards and commissions have social media. I noticed that our municipalities all post their notices in advance on Instagram and Facebook. That's awesome. That's a way for people to see what's going on and what's agended. So oddly enough, those kinds of tools that are probably more likely to reach the public are not required, but are encouraged. Any questions about notice from anyone? Oh, come on, you guys. All right. Your notice must, go ahead.
Margaret,
Yes.
we have Ian that has his hand raised. So
Okay,
go
Ian.
unmute in and ask your
Sorry,
question.
yeah, sorry. This is Chief Nelson. I didn't know how to. It didn't allow me to unmute myself. So, and came to the party late. I just got back from a call. But I was just curious. You were just talking about posting it on social media. Even though we do that, it's still required for the 2 newspapers. Is that correct?
It's required for a newspaper of general
Okay.
circulation.
So the
and
state
so-
website, a newspaper,
me-
and then
Yeah.
I apologize.
No, that's fine. I appreciate your question, Chief. So, and this PowerPoint will be available, and I was describing earlier, I hyperlinked it to the statutes so that if you have really detailed questions, you can go straight to the state law and look at it. And you can always call me as well.
Okay, thank you, Brent.
The first required place, Utah Public Notice website. Second required place, a newspaper of general circulation, and encouraged places are those ones that make sense. A website, a door, a bulletin board that everyone sees, or social media. Under the statute, your notice must include an agenda, date, time, place. That makes sense, right? And we'll get to place in a minute with electronic login instructions. But I want to talk a little bit about your agenda. Agendas are required to have reasonable specificity. Reasonable specificity is defined in the statute as a description that will notify the public as to the topics to be considered. And so I put out a couple of examples to illustrate this. Reviewing old business, nobody knows what that means, right? Or discussing constituent concerns, nobody's going to know what that means in advance. But again, think of, so people can read the agenda and know whether or not they want to attend and participate or monitor what's going on. A better description would be something like review and possible decision on 2021 sports changes for the North Summit Rec District, football, basketball, soccer, and baseball. That description provides the public with enough specificity that they know whether or not this is something they want to show up for. Also, a suggestion that I have for reasonable specificity is to hyperlink your agenda where possible. That way, that can hyperlink to staff reports or web pages, or say you're going to discuss a recent letter to the editor, it could hyperlink to that so that it's easy for people to look and see what is being discussed. Moving on to location, this is something that has changed with the advent of pandemic. It used to be that we always had our meetings with an anchor location, meaning a location where the public could physically appear and participate, and that we talked about electronic participation in terms of different board and commission members calling in and having a way for a rare, say a person was on vacation or a person was sick and needed to call in. Now with COVID, there was a law change during one of the 2020 special sessions that provided for electronic meetings during the pandemic. So the first thing you need to do to be able to have electronic meetings is to first pass a resolution, rule, or ordinance that governs your electronic meetings. And you can even dispense with the anchor location, the physical locations, if your chair makes a written determination every 30 days about the risk to public health and safety, and including specific facts and data. Now, specific facts and data about the current transmission risk in our community is available on the Summit County Health Department website. And you as chairs can easily access that information there and renew your written determinations about an anchor location every 30 days. Again, I'm happy to help you with that. I have a form that I developed for county council to be complying with that. The law, the new section, it's subsection 4 of Utah Code 52-4-207. The hyperlink is there. And if you need help with compliance, do let me know. I see a question up here. I'm going to click on it. Yeah, you'd still do, Sarah, need to renew the written determination within 30 days of your meeting. I don't think you need to do it like every 30 days if you're not going to meet, but do make sure that you have that prior to your meeting. Does that answer your question? Okay, super.
There is also a John Meek with his hand raised, and he is unmuted at this point.
Okay, super. Hi, John. I can't hear you though.
Let's try this one more time.
Looks like he is muted.
Yeah, I muted him to see if he could try to unmute again and ask his question.
John, can you type into the Q&A? How about this? John, if you would work on typing that into the Q&A, we'll come back to it at the end. I'm sorry about that. Oh wait, here's something else. Oh, okay, he's gonna type in and we'll come back to it at the end. Participation is also something that's defined in the state law, meaning the ability to communicate either verbally or electronically. That's ironic, isn't it, with John's issue? So that each member of the public body can hear or observe the communication. So again, we're trying electronically to provide a virtual interactive experience with members of the public when it comes to our Zoom or electronic meetings. The next topic that's covered by the Open and Public Meetings Act deals with the definition of what is a meeting and the conduct of meetings, both open meetings and closed meetings. Again, presumptively, if you're going to go away with the message, the general rule is meetings and discussions are open to the public unless you can justify closing them under very narrow statutory definitions. A meeting is defined in the code as the convening of a public body. We already defined a public body on an earlier slide, with a quorum for the purpose of discussing, receiving comments from the public about, or acting upon a matter over which the public body has jurisdiction or advisory power. That's a pretty broad definition of meetings. So be very aware if you are present in a quorum of your particular board or commission. Kinds of meetings that are subject to notice are not just the traditional meetings that you think of, but also workshops, executive sessions, site visits, and traveling tours. A meeting does not mean a chance or social gathering. So if everybody happens to be in the same lift line or in the same restaurant, the statute certainly provides an exception. But again, remembering the good faith intention of the law, not to meet, discuss, or decide anything without it being noticed, and there being a means for the public to observe, monitor, and participate is a good rule of thumb. I made a little quiz here, trying to make sure that we kept this interactive. What if your board hosts a reception for local business leaders? Would we need to notice that? Anybody? Oh, come on. Yes, I'd go ahead and notice that. What about if there's a Saturday retreat to talk about a strategic plan or the next year's coming goals? Would we need to notice that?
Definitely.
Thank you, Tom. How about a holiday party where your commission is going to hand out performance awards to employees? Probably not, right? You're not going to be discussing business. It's simply a celebratory or recognition type of event. Again, if you have questions about it, feel free to call the county attorney's office. It's a good reminder to think about what the definition of quorum is. That's just a simple majority. So depending on how many persons comprise your board of commission, be aware of what a simple majority is, and be aware of quorum. Quorum specifically does not include a meeting of 2 elected officials by themselves when no action is taken. And here, I'd like everyone to pay special attention to the by themselves part, because that's an important part of the exclusionary definition in the statute.
Ms. Olson,
Yes.
John Meek now has his question in the Q&A if you want to answer that.
Yes, let's look. If we make a resolution for attendance of Zoom meeting, make it so we do not have to give a written, John, the written determination every 30 days language is in that new subsection 4 of the statute. And I think in answer to the prior question from Sarah, make sure that you have the written determination within 30 days of your meeting if your meetings aren't regular enough. If that doesn't answer your question, please call me tomorrow. But I hope that was a good answer. Okay, super, thank you. This is a slide that I added because of COVID. I mean, having attended myself Zoom meetings regularly for 1 solid year, this is actually a thing, right? The temptation to, because you're not all in the same room, to text a colleague, or to say something in the Zoom chat. Don't do it. If you are a board member, you should not be engaging in those kinds of communications during an open meeting. I put at the bottom, say it so everyone can hear it. That's just needs to be your rule of thumb. So something like, could we take a restroom break is probably okay in the Zoom chat. Something like, I disagree, I'm not going to vote for this is not appropriate to put in a Zoom chat. Also avoid the temptation in this era of pandemic to be discussing things in email. So I wanted to talk a little bit about caveats with email and text among a board. It's okay to forward pertinent information to one another. Examples would be, I'm going to be 10 minutes late to our meeting, or I have to leave early from our meeting. I mean, that's non-substantive, right? Another example, I went before the Board of Health and talked to them about this last month. Rich Bolo texting the county council or the Board of Health about new COVID data is perfectly appropriate. Engaging in a conversation then about that new data or about the information is not proper. So just be careful about responding. One thing that we have adopted at the county council level is if somebody has something to share by way of information, we just put a little thing in asterisks at the beginning of the text, information only, do not respond. That way you're not inadvertently dragging your colleague into a discussion that ought to be observant of the Open and Public Meetings Act. Another comment I had is, common sense with this. It's really hard sometimes during pandemic to maintain a sense of unity or camaraderie or teamwork. So obviously, this admonition on discussions outside of public meetings does not pertain to sharing, lighthearted information, things that aren't related to the public business, cat videos, whatever, among yourselves. That's just a good way to all stay as a cohesive group during trying times. Any questions about that? The state law also contains provisions about emergencies. So if you have to have emergency meetings, and certainly this past year with pandemic, we in the county and different or the different boards and commissions did have emergency situations arise due to whether that was community spread or other information or emergency measures that we had to institute. So if you've got,
Wilson?
yes,
We have a Derek with his hand raised, and I'm assuming it's pertinent to the last slide.
okay. Hi, Derek.
Yeah. Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
I thought you had all my questions answered, but I thought I would just ask a couple of specific ones about email communication. So I am also acting as the clerk to issue expense checks and things like that. Is it appropriate to be able to talk to either the director or other board members about expenses in email?
Okay, so Derek, tell me what board or commission you're serving on.
The North Summit Special Recreation District.
Okay, and then you're also an employee?
No, I'm just volunteering.
You're a voluntary employee?
Well,
Helping
right,
with
I'm on the
operations.
board. Right, I'm on the board and I'm volunteering my accounting time.
Yeah, I would say if you have that hat on and you are relaying information about finances, you are good to communicate that by email. What you want to be sure that you're watchful of is if there starts to be reply to all and there actually is a discussion or a deliberation about that information, you'll want to, somebody hopefully on your board would say, wait a minute, we need to save this for open meeting.
Okay, that makes sense. And the other one is, we had a situation where we're coordinating our supporting documentation for our RAP tax usage. And we did that through email. Should that have been done through open meeting instead?
Okay, gathering supporting information?
Right, so we build a park using the funds and just coordinating, well, this person is going to write the summary description, this person's gathering the documents, this person is, coordinating more of what we needed to do.
And was that the gathering of information for a public packet?
No, it was going back to the tax. Oh my gosh, I just forgot. It's for the RAP tax, that committee. It was for them to review what we did with the funds.
From what you're describing to me, I think that sounds like that's okay. I mean, that's administrative. You're just
Okay.
trying to coordinate to put things together. You're not, let's go back to the definition of meeting. Discussing, reviewing comments from the public about or acting upon. So again, as you're going through this, you can reference this PowerPoint and the hyperlinks to the statute and just make sure that you're outside or inside these definitions.
It sounds like the administration was probably the line.
Mm-hmm.
If it's administrative work, it's one thing, but if you're seeking discussion, receiving comments, I understand it now. Thank you.
Yep, that definition of meeting is good to refer to. Okay, back to emergencies. These are truly unforeseen circumstances and you have to be able to articulate them. I use the example in my PowerPoint here as a broken water line that can't wait for the next scheduled meeting. But if you've got an emergency, refer to this hyperlink to section 202. It's going to require you to make an attempt to give the best notice practicable. So you may not be able to make the newspaper, but you can post on the public meetings website, utah.gov. And you must make an attempt to notify all members of your body, and you must have a majority of your members approve the meeting. So the statute is pretty easy to understand. Again, if anybody has an emergency, feel free to call the county attorney's office and we'll guide you through compliance on your emergency meeting. But just remember, you'll have to articulate why it's an emergency and something that can't comply with the 24-hour notice requirement. So I'm moving away from open meetings, which is most of what we all do, and into closed meetings. There are two ways to have a closed meeting. One, you can notice a closed meeting in advance, or you can always go into a closed meeting from an open meeting. You're going to need to follow procedure, take a vote, and record keep, and I'm going to get to all that in a moment. But those are the two ways that you can have a closed meeting. The procedure for closing a meeting, a quorum has to be present. Somebody needs to move to close the meeting and name the specific statutory reason for doing so. You'll need to take a roll call, get a 2/3 approval of your quorum that's present, observe the record keeping, recording, and affidavits. We're going to get to that in a minute. And then you'll have to have a motion to adjourn or return to your open meeting, and keeping track of your roll call vote. So referring to this slide, when you're going to have a closed meeting, I tried to lay out 6 easy steps to follow. And here's a quick reference guide for closed meetings. This is section 205 of the Utah Open and Public Meetings Act that you can refer to. There are some other reasons you can close meetings, but they're pretty obscure. These 4 are the main ones that any board or commission who's present tonight may run into. The first is litigation. That's defined as a strategy session to discuss pending litigation. Hopefully no one will be in pending litigation, or reasonably imminent litigation. And I've laid out here to the side recording and affidavit requirements that we'll talk about in a minute. But I put it on the cheat sheet for easy reference for you guys when you're referring back to this. You may close a meeting to discuss personnel, but that is narrowly defined as discussion of the character, professional competence, physical or mental health of an individual. So be careful not to close meetings to discuss personnel structure or personnel issues generally. It needs to be of an individual. Let's see, it looks like. Please, Chris. Hi, Chris. Please confirm that a roll call vote is required for approval of the motion to go into closed. Yes. Another reason you may close a meeting is for a strategy session to discuss the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property. And also for security, if it's the deployment of security personnel, devices, or systems. You know, there's an exception in the statute as well. If there's a criminal investigation that's going on, I would think that would be extremely rare. But referring to this section 205 here, if anyone's inclined to want to close a meeting from the public, you can refer to that statutory list. And again, call the county attorney's office. Any questions about closed? On personnel, what if you were discussing bonuses of a group of individuals? I would say no, Randy. Looking at the definition under the statute, discussion of the character, professional competence, or health of an individual, that's very narrow.
Margaret, just to follow that, what if the board was talking about characteristics of why they would issue a performance bonus for an individual?
I think then that would qualify.
Okay.
Thank you for that, Tom. You know, and again, I copied out the statutory definitions here, and each of you will always be required to try to apply those in good faith. But let's recognize that a lot of this is subjective and highly fact dependent. Okay, Chris Cherniak, can KPCW's public service announcement page serve as a meeting of? No. Actually, KPCW would not. It would be an alternative method that would be reasonably calculated to reach members of the public, but the statute actually requires a newspaper. That's probably antiquated in today's world, and it's a leftover statute from times past. But newspapers of general circulation are actually defined specifically in the code in another place. So it'd be great to go on KPCW because it would reach the public, but it would not fulfill the statutory requirement. Thanks for that question, Chris.
Ms. Olson, we have an in that has raised his hand.
Hi, Chief.
Hey, on those closed meetings, is that something that as the executive officer or the chief for the district that I need to be in or can be in, or how does that work?
Yes, you can be there. When we get to record keeping in a minute, we're going to talk about how important it is to make a record of who is present in those closed sessions. Also, as chief, you may be the person tasked with drafting agendas and looking at these definitions and making sure that it is appropriate for a closed session. So, yeah.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure if I have to be there, I'll make myself available for him. So
Super. You are required to record closed meetings. When we get to record keeping, we're going to also discuss the requirement that you record open meetings. But unless it's for personnel or security, you need to keep recordings of your closed meetings. Even though the public won't be able to access them, they're going to be protected records under GRAMA. You're still required to keep them. If someone challenges your closed meeting compliance, those recordings can be disclosed by a court order, or they may be reviewed by a judge in camera or in private. So you want to be sure to comply with the recording requirements for closed meetings. Going back to my cheat sheet here, if you're closing your meeting for security or for personnel, you do not have to record. If you're closing your meeting for any other reason, you do have to record. Any questions about recording closed? Things that are forbidden during closed meetings. You may not take any final action in a closed meeting. Final votes must be taken in the open and on the record. Similarly, you cannot approve an ordinance, resolution, rule, contract, or appointment in a closed meeting. Do not interview a person to fill, well, this would only be the county council, but you may not interview a person to fill an elected position in a closed meeting. There are no meetings that must be closed. If you are going to have a closed meeting for one of the 4 narrow reasons, it's always discretionary and not mandatory. And there is no law saying any meeting must be closed. Okay, I'm moving on to record keeping. Does anybody have questions about open or closed meetings? Okay, so I, citing the statutes, tried to make a slide here about record keeping for open meetings and record keeping for closed meetings. If you are going to have a closed meeting for personnel or security that doesn't have to be recorded, your chair has to prepare and have notarized an affidavit that the only topics that were discussed in that closed personnel or security session was personnel or security. So if you're doing that, contact me. I have a form that I developed where you can just fill in the blanks by hand so that your chair is complying with the law and keeping as a record an affidavit of closed meetings that aren't recorded. All open meetings need to be, there needs to be a recording of them. So if anybody hasn't been doing that, you're going to need to obtain technology to make sure that you're complying with that provision of the law. There are record keeping deadlines. Within 3 days of an open meeting, you've got to make your audio recording available to the public. The way most boards, commissions, and councils do this is by posting it on a web page. You can also post it to that utah.gov public meetings website, but that needs to happen within 3 days of any public meeting. So the public who wasn't able to attend can listen and monitor what was going on. You must make pending minutes available to the public within, quote, a reasonable time. Be sure to identify those pending minutes as unapproved, but I don't know what a reasonable time means other than with all deliberate effort. So be aware of preparing minutes shortly thereafter and making the pending ones available. And then within 3 days after approving minutes, those need to be available to the public. Again, on your website or at the utah.gov public meeting website. Any questions about this record keeping and the deadlines? Okay, we're almost to the end. Hang in there with me. The last topic for my presentation is enforcement. As I am charged as county attorney with educating within this county as to Open Meetings Act compliance, I'm also charged with enforcement of the Open Meetings Act. And members or private members of the public can also enforce the Open Meetings Act. Any party denied a right by action taken can file an action in court. The court may order compliance It could stop or enjoin any violation, and it could make you, the board or commission, pay the aggrieved party's attorney's fees. So that's pretty stiff, setting aside your final action, making you pay the attorney's fees for the person who challenged you. Also, I'm going to go back to that slide in a second. If you knowingly or intentionally violate the Open Meetings Act provisions and hold a closed meeting in violation of law, it's potentially a Class B misdemeanor, which is punishable by up to 6 months in jail and $1,000 fine. That's also pretty serious. Other examples of Class B misdemeanors include DUI and simple assault. So the law takes it pretty seriously if any member of a public body were to knowingly or intentionally violate the Open Meetings Act provisions and illegally hold a closed meeting. We also have non-criminal remedies, which I just alluded to. A high profile example of this is Summit County's challenge to the town of Hideout over their annexation activities. And we filed an action in court trying to avoid the actions taken for violations of the Open Meetings Act. Sometimes violations can be cured, but any party, including another government, could file an action in court and seek to void what you've done. We already talked about this. I'm responsible for doing an annual training by law, but your chair needs to verify that each of you do this training on an annual basis. So please certify to your chair if you attended this tonight or if you're watching it on video later. In summary, I listed out some common violations of the Open and Public Meetings Act, and I'll just walk through them with you, but it's also a good cheat sheet. Closing a meeting without a quorum present and members voting to close. Having a closed meeting for reasons other than what I put on that cheat sheet or what's allowed in section 205. Taking final action in a closed meeting. Failing to properly notice, or failing to identify your agenda items with reasonable specificity. And you need to worry about giving public comment or allowing public comment on a pending application if there hasn't been notice to the applicant that there's going to be public comment. It's just another thing to be aware of or to try to avoid. Here's Darlene. Darlene, did you have a question?
You
Darlene,
can't,
unmute.
Arlene.
Can you hear me?
Oh, hi. Who's under Darlene's?
Yeah, this is Jack Clayton.
Hi,
Sorry. I couldn't get it on my phone, so I had to do it on her computer. I just wondering is there somehow you mentioned the going to our supervisor or our chairman and tell them we came to the meeting. How do we do that?
Oh,
Here,
yeah, the chair should take responsibility for ensuring that. Here, did I cite the statute here? Yes. And it's okay just to email your chair and your chair can keep a tally. And I think that's sufficient because it's the chair's statutory duty to ensure that.
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And
And
there
that's
is
also
a,
Chris's question. So. here are my parting tips. 24-hour notice, be specific. Close meetings only for allowed statutory purposes. Prepare and provide your minutes in a timely manner. Don't text each other during meetings. Do your training once a year. Err on the side of transparency, and when in doubt, consult your lawyer. That's me. So that's it, folks, for tonight. I hope that wasn't too boring. But let me know if you have any questions, and thank you for attending.
Okay, Bon Jasper has their hand raised.
Yeah, I wanted to say something to our county attorney.
Hi, Bob.
Good job.
Thank you, Bob. It's
That's all I
important.
had.
It's important. I thank everyone for attending.
Okay, well, thanks for doing it.
My pleasure.
Okay, and Mr. Clegg has his hand raised as well. Mr. Clegg, if you could unmute yourself, please.
Can you write in the Q&A maybe? While Jack's figuring out the mute or the chat, Chris Cherniak asked a question. Our meeting minutes are approved the following month. That's absolutely reasonable, since that's your next regularly scheduled meeting. I think that's very timely.
Okay, I've tried to unmute Mr. Clegg's microphone.
I think
if you
I
wanna-
got it finally. I just want to thank you for taking time to do this. It's been interesting, and I wonder about a few of them things. Are they new, or has this all been all along?
You know, some of it is new. It's the part about not having to have an anchor location and conducting electronic meetings. Here, let me back up. That is definitely new. Well, I guess I can't. I've lost my PowerPoint.
That's okay.
A lot of this I've teased out of the statute based upon questions and circumstances that have arisen over the past while to make sure that I'm emphasizing the appropriate things. I'm always willing to come in to any specific board or commission and give a specialized presentation. It's part of my job, and I'm very pleased to come in and do a special training and answer specific questions about specific board business. And it's also a great way for me to get to know people and have a personal line of communication. So I'm more than happy to do that. In fact, I'm going next week to do the Francis Town Council and the Francis Planning Commission.
All right. Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jack. I appreciate it.
And Sharon has a question up on Q&A.
The discussions of outside meetings was particularly appropriate. Yeah, it's just a good reminder, especially where people aren't physically together. We can get complacent about texting and talking to one another outside of the meetings because we're all always Zooming and talking on the phone. So thanks, Sharon, for that. All right, questions from anyone else? Thanks for attending, everyone.